And here we are, fresh off a win at Cage Warriors. The Trilogy Strikes Back. Decky McAleenan, how you doing, my friend? Little round of applause. Sure, the audience can't handle themselves. They absolutely love it.
Thank you, Dan. How's things?
Yeah, well, good, my friend. How are you holding up? So again, I know experienced man yourself, had many a win before, but nice and fresh. How's it feeling? You feeling good? You feeling, ready to go again? What's the current like?
Yeah, feeling fresh. That said, sort of more injuries going into the fight than I did coming out of it. So it's good that way. So it is. Just came back home Saturday and was made the conditioning session Saturday at 2:15.
This is sort of no rest. That's the thing in itself. And like with the cut and everything else, was there much to do regards to like the sort of trip across again? Because I know it's not exactly a million miles away, but it's still like plane journey, this, that, and the other. How was that
Yeah,
managing and stuff?
it was grand. So it was bar. I left everything to the last minute, packing wise, and then I was so Tuesday night. I was flat out trying to get everything sorted. And then the child decided not to sleep. So I got about 3 hours sleep. So it was an early start Wednesday morning. So that wasn't great. Like,
I mean, funnily enough, this is sort of the transition, and this is, I think, an interesting topic of being a dad and also being a professional fighter. Because again, in the ideal world, you'd have your set sleeps, that everything, meals are laid out. But no, okay, 2 a.m, kids woken up. Okay, now I've got to get something to eat. I'm hungry still. How are you
yeah,
finding that transition?
the sort of lockdown has helped me a wee bit. Giving me time, not going straight into like becoming a dad and then straight into fighting. So I had a bit of time to sort of transfer over. Like the boys would take the piss in the club. I used to struggle to make it to 10 o'clock classes in the morning with sleeping in and stuff. And now that's gone. Like, I'm up at maybe whatever time the child wakes up at, I have to get up at. Like,
This would be their socks and Crocs soon as well. You won't care about anything. You start dressing like a dad as well. This is it.
yeah, I'm pretty straightforward anyway. All my clothes are black tracksuits. So it doesn't,
It's all it needs. It's all it needs. No need to sort of overcomplicate it.
no.
Now, with that being said, then has your like training schedule changed much with that being said, like planned in advance? Was it like, okay, if I can't do these early mornings, can't do these late ones? Is it sort of mix around? How has it sort of changed?
Uh, it's been a lot more structured. It's actually, if anything, I'm getting more training in and getting better training because there's no more just like, as I said, sleeping in for the 10 o'clock class and trying to gather up a few of the boys and do a bit of training. Like later on in the day, now everything is structured and whatever is put in, like we're running past the coaches, whatever's put into my diary at the weekend, that's the training that I do each week. Like, don't miss out on it, like, which is a lot more sort of regimented.
Well, it definitely makes a lot more sense doing that way as well, especially when it comes to like periodizing, block building and also like programming stuff.
Yeah.
Now, throughout like your camp and your training in general, have you been quite numbers based and very much like, okay, we're doing this week, it's week one, block A, this, that, and the other. We're doing explosive work and this kind of prioritizing, or is it more go how you feel and sort of a bit more freestyle as such?
No, it has been. It's been, as I said, it's been more structured. There has been a lot of. We've added in a lot more conditioning and doing things like that. A lot more strength work. But we also have been sort of. Sebastian's been running the camp as in the start of it. We're going over my weaker areas, spending more time doing grappling and wrestling and the stuff that I don't enjoy as much, doing like the wall work and silly things like that. And then midway through, we changed up and got a lot more sort of striking in. And then back to doing like everything. Then towards the end was just structured perfect. Like don't put
So
together.
regards to like your preferences and the way you do your camps, the way you have these sort of structures, do you do a lot of strict discipline work or is it all MMA based everything?
It's becoming more MMA based, but like I would do a lot of jiu-jitsu, a lot of just straight up striking, a lot of just straight up. We've got a new wrestling coach, so now that's done. Like we're getting to do like each area is becoming done. Like we would do a lot of that like in just a single area, and then now we've added in maybe there's 4 MMA classes per week, like full MMA classes. No more like just if you're gonna go and box, you're gonna go and box. Don't like now we do like boxing and wrestling. Don't like our boxing and
Mm.
wall. No, it's a lot better now. Like it's a lot more MMA based.
Well, that's certainly where you see the progression. You see where the holes sort of form at the sort of high levels of that bit of timing, the setups, and everything else. And regards of your development in those sessions, do you go in there with certain like internal tick lists? Then, okay, if we're going to do these like striking stuff, I'm going to make sure I land these entries, this, that, and the other. Is it okay? I'm going to win certain rounds, or just get in, get out, and see what happens.
No. I don't like. I always have something to work on in my head. If the person that I'm training with is better than me, then we have to get in and get out, and don't like pick my strongest area to try and win that round. And then if the person's not as good as me, then we have to start. Don't like. There's no point getting in and blindly don't pushing the pace that the sort of pointless on the other person and pointless for myself. I'll then work on certain areas, whether it be my shots, whether it be my entries, whether it be my jab, whether it be my kicks, whatever it is, I'll work specifically on that in that round.
So, just to clarify on that, then, is that more based off of their strengths opposed to your weaknesses, or is it more okay? This is the game plan I would implement in a round, and this is their reaction, and so on and so forth, like sort of feeling out. If you see what I mean?
Yeah, it would be more. This is what I would implement in this round.
Okay, that's definitely a lot more interesting way of going about and everything else. And when it comes to obviously fights coming up, do you change it towards the opponent as such, or is it all your own personal holes to fill in as such?
Uh, a bit of both, to be honest. It used to be I couldn't have cared who I was fighting or what they done. I just thought I would have finished whoever was put in front of me, and or got finished myself. So like that's the way I sort of looked at it and wasn't too fussed about which way it went. Unfortunately, the first pro fight I had didn't go my way. I shattered my hand and I near had an injury that near put me out of fighting completely, just with re-breaks and being told that I shouldn't do it, and different things like that. My hand wasn't going to hold up. So I've lost track of what I was saying. Oh, the game plan is right. But then after that, I went on a 5-fight win streak
I mean,
and just
sorry, go on.
stopped everyone. So I was kind of like, sorry.
A bit of a delay. Don't worry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Just a bit of a
All
thing in
right, sorry.
between.
No, so I went in a 5-fight winning streak. Didn't research anyone because of the amount of pullouts I had and done like different fights falling through. I just show up, fight, and feel them out in the first round, and usually finish them in the second. And it was only then whenever I came back to Cage Warriors, that I fought Amable, who had near 20 pro fights whenever I fought him. And his experience, he had game plan to fight me. And I was just showing up and winging it, thinking that I could finish him. So by the end of that fight, he had won each round. But I was the one going for the finishes, doing like nearly like hurting, like landing the better shots, throwing the submissions up, doing like going for stuff. And then like right, and remember there was a scramble at the end of the fight, and I can remember saying to myself, "Shit, don't like you haven't stopped him. Don't like how don't like it
Now
was
what? Yeah.
something." Yeah, like now what? And I think I went for an armbar. Don't like just like sort of a stupid armbar just to try and finish him. And then it was like shit. Like you've definitely lost every one of them rounds. Where are we going? And then after that, then I started game planning, not researching the fighter, but game planning more for what I was going to do in the fight. And then just against Ventre, then we looked at what he had done. This is the first time that we've actually sat and I like repeatedly watched these fights, watch what he done, what his tendencies are, and I think that's the way forward.
I mean, there's a lot in that. I mean, obviously the debut loss to is it James Gallagher? Was it your pro debut? Yeah,
Yeah.
again, coming off an injury loss, actually a hand as well. Like, what was the recovery like for that as well? Because again, obviously you've gone from the amateur rankings, it's your first like step in the pro leagues, and you get this big upset in itself. And again, having that conviction to strike, like, how did you find coming back to just training in the first place from that?
It was horrible. Like this, without exaggerating anything, I mourned that loss. Like that was a rough time for me. So it was between the pain of the end, like my hands now a terrible shape. Like between the pain of the injury and the annoyance of the loss, I would say it was 3 or 4 weeks before I actually got a night's sleep. Just constantly going over it and over and in my head. And then you have, like, the bone was sitting completely snapped in half. Like, you could move your hand and see the bone moving. And then the doctor was like, "Oh no, I'll fix that by just putting you in a cast." And I was like, "Look, this is what I want to do," and blah blah blah. And he's like, "No, it's okay. We'll put you in a cast and it'll be fixed." So I said, "Right, that's no problem." We done that, and then said they gave me whatever turnaround time for it to be fixed. I was always weeks behind that, as in I was ahead of what they were telling me in the hospital. But training wise, if they said like next week you can hit pads, I left it for 3 weeks before I hit pads. You know, if they said right next week you can hit the heavy bag, I left it, you know, like for another couple of weeks before I done that. So I was always like over careful with it. And then anytime we got back to sparring, my hand broke. So I think it happened 4 times. I think it was maybe 16 months from my pro debut to my second pro fight, maybe 14 months, which was taken on a week's notice. And I was kind of, from that, I really got the love for fighting again because it was very nearly over for me. So, and then you go to the doctors tell you, "Oh, well, maybe you should find something else to do," and you know, stupid things like that. So,
Oh, that's a
and
bit, yeah.
one doctor in particular, I went private then and went to a hand specialist, and he was a rugby player in his time, and he loved amateur boxing. He worked with a lot of boxers and loved amateur boxing, and couldn't understand what I was doing. So all we do is punch each other in the head. So I was, cheers for your opinion on that, like, you know. So I'm finding someone else to try and fix it.
I mean, again, there's so much in that in itself. I mean, the frustration and everything else going on, because the nature of like MMA, like obviously boxing, to just be completely devil's advocate, punching and footwork, that's what you can work on. Just to be a bad guy. And MMA, obviously grappling and everything else. Because again, could you even grapple with that hand? Could you even put weight on it? Could you like pummel or anything?
I held a tennis ball, and I didn't use that hand. Any kind of grappling at all that I done, I was holding a tennis ball so that there was no pressure on that hand whatsoever.
I mean, that in itself, again, how can you stay the same kind of just momentum, really, consistency? Because again, like training regularly, competing regularly, this is your first big step, the hand goes, and then getting back into it. Like, how was your even motivation to come back to training in the rehab process? Because again, you're saying the time between the fight itself, but even like, okay, I can't even hit pads. Like, what can I even do? Like, was your head sort of thinking, okay, just tick along? Was it just go through the motions? Is it, how are you coping with that kind of like mindset as such?
It happened that my Thai boxing club, we have like a RMMA, Jiu-Jitsu, Thai boxing's all under one roof. And just in the build up to that pro fight, I had started the kids and teenagers Thai boxing classes under Neri Muay Thai under my coach Sean Smith. He had given me sort of the leeway to go ahead with that. And the only thing I think that got me through the injury period was teaching the kids and teenagers. Because in that short space of time that I was out injured, I think within that time, from only starting the kids and teenagers, we had 4 Irish champions maybe. Because that's just solely focused on that, and that was sort of my output, you know, like our input to fighting. And then obviously it was just constantly, I don't know anything else. I've been doing this. I'm 29 now. I started whenever I was 8 years old. I don't really know anything else, or I don't do anything else. So I had to, whether it was grappling with the ball in your hand, whether it was footwork on the ladder, whether it was boxing with one hand, working your kicks, working your elbows, working your knees. There was a lot can be done with just one hand. Like,
I mean, this is kind of the point in itself, is to say if you've got the mindset to want to come back and feel, I think the hunger I want to say, to then want to do the other stuff around it. Because otherwise, if you see the hurdles of the things you want to do, which you can't do, it's very debilitating. That's the word to English, so I can't speak it. And again, this is in itself, being in the coaching environment and being like, you know, present and still being in that environment without having to feel like you're not doing enough. You're doing what you can is an interesting way about it. And if anything, having the sort of, I don't know, the fact it was almost taken away from you gives it so much more value having it back. That thinking, okay, this could be taken away just like that. Like I could just, hit a
Yeah,
pad fun and that's it gone.
that's it. Like, because I went from that thinking that this was all taken away from me to I actually had went back. I'd given myself till March. I think it was 2017 maybe or 18. I give myself anyway to March, whenever this was. It was like maybe September, October time, and it says if I'm not fighting by March, that's me done now. So pretty much if my hand breaks again, I'm out. Like I'm not putting up. I can't do it anymore. It's not fair on myself. It's not fair on like I'm starting to get more and more agitated with it. That sort of way. So it said that I'll fight, and if I don't fight by March, that's it. We're going to have to. Like I'm not able to do it. And I was over in California training with Team Alpha Male, and I had just finished boxing sparring maybe, and Sebastian had got on to me and Marcin about fights on Cage Warriors. One was in 2 weeks, and the other I think was in 4 weeks. And it just happened to be that my weight was lower than Marcin's, so I took the first fight on 2 weeks' notice, 3 weeks' notice, whatever it was. I was in California, and they said, "Yeah, I may as well fight. See what way we get on." Everything went perfect. Won the fight in the first round, broke my hand, and I was like, "This is just going to be a thing now." That I didn't even care. It was like I had the mindset and I had the skill set now to deal with being able to go from your debut pro fight, not really throwing elbows, not used to throwing elbows, that whenever you're hitting pads and you don't have a right hand, you only have an elbow, your elbows become very fluid and very comfortable to throw. So whenever it went, it was just like, that's gone, but we still have our elbows. We still have other weapons and other tools. So I was a lot more prepared for it to happen then. And lucky enough, got the win and got back on track.
Again, you start these things, there's so much to sort of unpack in itself, like Team Alpha Male and everything else. I mean, with that then, so you're saying there, if this goes again, I'm done. But then having the finish and then having it as well, it's an interesting kind of, okay, the way you change that perspective of if this happens again, this is it. So, no, that's it. It happens. And you sort of move on straight from there.
My idea was if this happens again in training where I can't get myself to a fight, then it's a problem. But once I get myself into the cage, I'm putting my body on the line. Like I don't care. A hand's not going to stop me in a fight. So just as long as I kind of sort of shrugged it off and says this might be the way it is, where you're going to have to book 4 or 6 weeks off after every fight, and let this heal. And then lucky enough, it got the time healing what it needed, and I actually managed to crack him hard enough to break a different part of the same bone, so that first injury, so it was, if anything, most people think, oh well, they have a broken hand. I was saying it's not too bad. It's only a crack and it's further down the bone, so I hit him hard enough to crack the bone but not break the thing that was giving me issues. So I was happy with that, and like it wasn't a big deal.
I mean, fucking hell, he was doing it pretty hard. And with that being said, anyway, like, again, the intricacies of the hands and everything else, because you hear stories of like public sort of GPs and stuff saying, "Oh, cast it, that's the end of that." Whereas the hand surgeons say, "No, if we don't do this, you won't be able to fight again. You won't be able to make a fist." Like
Yeah.
one of my friends and training partners, Dan McGowan, and he's had like hand problems as well. And Jordan Vucenic, he had a hand thing a little while ago. And again, you get these kind of issues that if they're not sorted properly, we can have some real sort of issues. So regards of your training then, so you're saying with the fight, if your hand goes, your elbows, but obviously it would be a very popular training partner who start throwing elbows. So is it a case of you just throwing with
No,
big gloves only in sparring, you're not throwing the right hand at all? What's the general like rule of thumb for that?
no, that's years ago. That's a thing of the past. As I said, that was my first 2 pro fights.
Mm.
That was an issue. Now we're 10 fights in. We've 8 fights under our belt, and there's no from a Yeah, there's been no real problem. There's been no issues with that now, thankfully.
Oh, perfect. As I
I just
say,
hope
and
it
that
stays
feels like
that
a
way.
bit of a something you're just been doing, like, maintenance to make sure it doesn't happen again. So, well, we
No,
take it
that
there.
was,
So, regards to like the
yeah,
game planning, back to the sort of the task hand with that, who was your game planning so specific with the opponent? Say with Ventre, sort of things you want to implement then, or is it more a case of, okay, this is a hole he might try and exploit in my game, so I'm going to capitalize on that? You see what I mean?
yeah, we did. We had sort of implemented my game plan. We were hoping that like Ventre came out the way he came out against like the likes of Took or someone like that. John like can come out heavy and John like pushed in the first round with his hands. I didn't expect him to shoot so fast. Like it wasn't even 30 seconds into the first round he'd shot. But it's judging off his previous fights, I haven't seen him do that. So it was kind of just a case of I was expecting a wee bit more out of him, and that's why I was expecting the second round finish. Was because I was expecting to throw a wee bit in the first round and have a bit of back and forward, and then with the pace that I would push, that come the second round he wouldn't be able to keep the same pace that we pushed in the first round. Unfortunately, we did frig all in the first round really, and I was fresh enough. So like I at that stage, like I was talking to Sebastian in the corner. He asked how it was or whatever it was, and like I hadn't even broke a sweat. I think that's the words I said to him was I haven't broke a sweat yet.
I mean, that in itself works quite nice with the grappling side of things, because again, if you're trying to implement some sort of controls, that's when the sort of slipping gets in the
Yeah,
way. But again, it's very frustrating sort of style when you end up sort of, getting grapple fucked, for lack of a better choice of words. But no, it's good to manage to be
yeah,
able to plan for that and be proactive. Now, when it comes to the
yeah.
events themselves and the build of everything else, how do you compose I don't know, the emotions and nerves, whatever you want to call it? How do you deal with, okay, I've got a fight on UFC Fight Pass, on Cage Warriors, the trilogy, whatever you want to call it, on the whole being around the environment, being in a fight camp mode as such? How do you process those kind of, I don't know, emotions, energy, whatever sort of words you'll use for it?
Uh, Back to what like I've had hundreds upon hundreds of fights in different disciplines, in no discipline. Like I fought in front of hundreds, thousands, and I fought in front of nobody. At the end of the day, on on Friday night past, me and Ventre were going to fight, not on UFC Fight Pass or on Cage Warriors or for a big like I had to meet him in the middle of the cage on Friday night and fight with him. Nobody else, nothing else. That's all. I love fighting on the bigger platform and I love all that kind of stuff now because of the response you get after it. But as I said, there's been plenty of time where I've had to fight someone with no one there, or I've had to fight with plenty of people there. It doesn't really make a difference.
Okay. So that's it's good, the fact you can sort of not even compartmentalize that, sort of, okay, you can just take it for what it really is instead of like the actual artificial layers of the other sort of pressures and everything else, but more so the composure and the sort of venom as such. Because again, you compare it to a sparring session. Like, how do you differ that in your head as such? Is it okay, I've essentially sparring but not holding back? Is it a case of this is, you've got to get some sort of, not animosity as such, but a bit more venom behind it? Like, how do you have a certain like mindset for a fight? Do you have a switch as such, or is it more just business as usual?
Yeah, it's not a switch. It's different. Like I can switch into fight mode easy. That's whatever it is, whether it's a wee bit more badness, it's probably actually a wee bit more calmer, more like like calm and collected than getting angry and wanting to hurt someone. Like I know that if I can stay like if I try to hurt someone, like really really try and knock them out or really try like it's not going to happen. You're just going to be stiff and you're going to be slow. So just go out, relaxed, and take like as you said, take it exactly as it is and see what's happening in front of you, and then it's not an issue. Like
I mean, that in itself is so important to sort of build that level of composure because, again, this isn't something that's. Is that something instinctive to you? Is it something how it's always been? Do you used to be a bag of nerves, or is it something that you've sort of built up over time? This kind of mindset.
Uh, Not nerves, no. Uh, I would have been bad tempered if I don't like always like play. I'd rather been disqualified than lost the fight. Like I would have threw the head and done something that wasn't done because somebody, and then be like, well, fuck it, I didn't lose. Like you're over there in a heap and I'm standing over here. I win that fight. Um, but then see him as playing football, if like the stupid stuff, getting yellow cards for someone diving, I would have thrown my boot in you after that then and been like, well, just give me a red card and send me off or something. I did do, you know, like different things like that, which as I've matured, I've got out of that sort of process. So I have, you know, like where someone trying to wrestle, fuck you, it doesn't bother me. I would like back as an amateur. The first person that I think it was my third amateur fight, I fought a brown belt, and he same again. He was just trying to pin me against the wall, hold me there, and fucking dry hump me. So I hit him a slap. John like lost the plot, hit him a slap, and John because we were on the cage, you couldn't really punch him, and started talking shit. I lost the plot completely. But in the point of that was then I ended up getting beat that fight because I'd lost my composure. So then it was kind of like a pointer. You can, if you want, you can sort of lose your temper and use that as your excuse. Don't like to get out there. Well, sure, it doesn't matter anyway. I've done that and I've done this. Or you can just man up and sort of deal with the issues at hand on why you're losing these things and how you're losing these things and what control you need to have over yourself. And then whenever that sort of came on board, then I've been sweet since. Like,
I mean, that sort of reflection is definitely a really important tool with sort of composure and general sort of progress. Because again, if you're getting wrestle fucked and you're getting frustrated, like you take Luke Shanks and Jake Hadley, the main event on the Friday. Again, you can see Luke's frustration, see him running in over and over again. And as his former teammate, it's very frustrating watching that. But anyway, the more point of okay, take one first round, that's that. We won't talk about the other four, that's
that,
fine. But you know, the idea of being okay, you get the first sort of instance, this is a problem, then reflect and then crack on. How are you with that in a fight in itself? Do you treat a fight as basically one long round, or is it a case of okay, I've won or lost this first round. The second round is, you know, fill in these gaps.
yeah,
Is it fresh round, fresh start? Where do you see your these sort of splits?
I used to think of it as one whole thing. That you know, like, and that's what used to get me. If you lost the first round, you're playing catch up. You're playing catch up going into the second round. You're probably going to lose the second round. At this stage, now you need to finish in the third round. If it is only 3 rounds, that obviously that's different. That was a title fight. It was 5. You're playing catch up going into the third round. You're hunting now. You're probably not going to get the finish. You know, you're going to try something stupid and don't like and not get what's needed. With that was Luke's flying knee in the 5th round. Right off, it was the 5th round, won it right off the
Yeah.
start of the bat, and it was the takedown off it. So some of these things in a fighter's head, you have to go for broke in them situations, but it's not always the right thing to do. You know, whereas like against Aimable, I was the same myself. Each round, it was a kick that got me taken down. Uh, each round, I done the same thing because the first time I threw it, I hurt him, and he was like you could hear him like wincing and doing stuff whenever we clinched up. So I was just hunting for that one kick. I'd lost the first round. It was like shit, right? Go hunting, get the second round, done the same thing. Third round, done the same thing. Whereas against after that, then it's just like right. Fights from that, starting with Tom Burns, was like, right, you lost the first round, you have 2 more. At the minute, it's 1-0. We still can get 2. If I get this next round, now we're talking, like we're going into the third round even. So if you can think of that, it's easier to gather your composure as, right, scrap that. Like with Ventre on Friday, scrap the first round, we're in the new a new thing. I have to win this. Change the game plan slightly, and then it worked perfect.
I mean, that transition is really interesting, how you're getting the urgency sort of changing from, okay, I have to finish him, otherwise, oh shit, I've lost the fight. The decision's already there. Like, before you even realised it, to then compose it between the rounds to sort of tallying, okay, 1-0, 1-0, whatever else, to then, okay, this is, I need to get it done within the first one or two. This is the plan, but still winning the rounds in itself. And again, that sort of happy medium as such. And like, well, after a fight in itself, do you spend a lot of time reflecting off the mistakes as such? Is it, okay, I've sort of felt it in there and then, that's my learning, then come back? Or where do you sort of see your post-fight stuff? Is it quite an in-depth sort of breakdown?
Yeah, that's by far, if I'm not my biggest critic, the Elbow will be my biggest critic. One of the two of us. From years upon years, like back to my karate days, I would have been maybe the only person on the national team that has won a competition in wherever we were, whatever part of Europe, whatever part of the world, whatever part of the UK we were in. I might have been the only person on our team that has won the competition, but I would be the only one sitting in the room studying competition, studying what not studying, watching, seeing the breakdown. Well, the first fight against your boy, what did you do? Well, that was shit, because if he had been better, he could have done this, and then you would have broke down like the whole way to the final, the whole way to your win. And then other boys that lost in the first round, they fucked off. They were out eating, out for a meal, out having a drink with their family. And you're going like, if I'm sitting here and I'm not like, this is from I started on the national team when I was 13, so obviously I wasn't drinking at that stage. But they were out for food with their family and stuff. I would order me a pizza. I'm going to the room and I'm going to sit and study what has happened that day while it's fresh in my head. So you'd see me with a big thick head in me after winning the competition because I didn't do something right. And then that's between me or him. He, like, there's competitions I've won and was slapped in the back of the head and told it was terrible. There's competitions where I've been beat in the first or second round and I got a pat in the back and told, right, that was, you're just beat by the better man today, which is, it was hard to take, but it's good, like, and it's made me sort of, I don't think if I had been taken out like the rest of them for food, or I wasn't punished, don't get me wrong, it was my choice to stay back and watch these things. But if I had been like, no, you won, come on, we'll go out and we'll get this, or no, you won, come on, and you're great, come on, we'll do this, I don't think I'd be where I am today.
Now, this is a really important subject, and I like the way you're sort of describing those kind of things. Because again, that kind of complacency to say, okay, that was good enough, and then, go off and do whatever and celebrate. Like, this is the difference between improving and, coasting and getting the default bronzes to getting the golds. And even then, like, how do you moderate your critique? Because again, it can get you can always find some sort of fault or some sort of flaw, and you can always make a scenario up. How can you restrict your critique to keep it constructive without going too sort of detrimental and sort of knocking your confidence as such?
Uh, you have to sort of be confident enough to think that you can beat most people on your bad days. Like, I haven't even scratched the surface of how good I know I am and how good I have been in the gym. There's been glimpses of it in fights, but we're not even close yet. I'll criticize, like, I don't have a good word to say about that fight on Friday night. It was the only decent thing really is a sub to black belt. So that's the only thing to take from it. I'll talk to my coaches. We'll watch the fight together. I already know where I went wrong. There's, as I said, I can't find much good about the fight bar my composure and getting that submission. But I'll say to them what I think. They can constructively criticize me. Like, I'll say what I have, then we'll argue about, well, no, well, that you done this Decky or you done that Decky, and I'll be like, no, but this was this and that was that, and then we sort of back and forth. It would be grand then, like, but it doesn't, like, don't get me wrong, it's not like I'm sitting here going, oh, I'm bloody terrible, so I am, this is the worst thing ever. I watch it and know what to improve on, and I get on about my business.
So even with that, then it's more so okay. I could have done this then. I could have done this, that, and the other. Is it more the way you've done certain things in more technique, more specific intricacies? Is it more the decisions you made? Is it more game planning versus outcome application? Like what sort of areas are you sort of going into as such? Because again, you could always say, I don't know, my walkout song wasn't good enough or whatever. You can go to such like insignificant sort of things. Or is it what areas are you most focused on? Like if you had to nail down to the specific area you're gonna put your first point of priority on, what would it be?
Just what way, what what I was able to do in the fight, what way the game planning that I was doing, what way it panned out, and what way that there's the check, and what way was I able to stop him from game plan? John, what way was I able to stop his game plan, or how was I able to deal with what he came at me with? John, like if, say for talk's sake, we thought Ventre was going to strike, he didn't. Grappled straight away. Second round, quick change of plan, and then that was, don't like that was able to counteract then his game plan. So on the plus side, that was the bonus. Don't like that. That's the good part of it. On the bad side is we spent the first round on the ground. Problem being with that, there's an excuse in what happened. Thursday, the week before the fight, I bollocks my ribs, and the muscle running down the front of the psoas or something and down my lat was done. So I was afraid to explode to try and get up off the ground. I was safe enough, and whenever I hit the turn for the first armbar, I knew that I could hit armbars or triangles, and I was, like my ribs were sweet, but I was afraid that one big explosiveness to get up against the cage was where I sort of bailed out of it and sat back. I sat back against the cage with the butterfly hooks, and then sat back down in the Mackyard and was like, no, we'll just stay and play it safe just because of that one thing.
See, I like the way you've done that there. I like how it's not so much, okay, you should have thrown this, should have done that, should have sprawled, should have done this. I like the way you're breaking it down to, okay, this was a problem because this, we responded by doing this, a sort of, not sort of flow kind of concept as such. Okay, what happened with there? Okay, what's the positive, negatives? Why was that decision made? Because again, that in itself is an interesting one. Not what you did, but why you did it. Why was that your reaction? But it's good the fact you're able to, I don't know, adapt and improvise. Because that's most of it really. Is being responsive on top of everything else. And with that in general, how do you take that into your training in itself? Do you have like a training journal after a session? Do you go down and say, okay, I did this well, this wrong. This is something I need to work on. Is it an internal kind of reflection, that kind of side of things?
Yeah, I'll reflect on it myself a lot. Like that's just if I have a good day. I'm not one of these people that think if I land one jab in sparring that I can go home and be like, here, a jab the head of the boys today was unbelievable. My jab.
Mayweather, something
Don't
like.
like, yeah, don't like. It's more like realistic. Like, if you land a jab, if you land a couple of jabs, or your boxing's real good today, like that was good. How did he deal with whenever you were putting the pressure on with your hands? How did he deal with that? Right. Well, that would be his reaction then. Like, and how did you react to that? Like, it's more just back and forth. You have these stupid wee conversations with yourself, like where you're saying what you would do, what he would do. Well, what did you do back to what he done? Like, and try and work that way. Like,
I mean, that in itself is an interesting way how you sort of develop in, I think, almost in MMA and jiu-jitsu more specifically, a lot of action reaction sort of thing. Like, regards of your development and understanding of the sport and the martial arts in general, obviously in various different disciplines, are you very much like action reaction? Are you more build a sort of system up? Is there reference points you've got? Like, how do you learn, like, in an ideal world?
I learned by watching stuff and doing things. Like I was never, school never suited me. Like that's how I got into the sports sort of thing. I think it was third year in school, or 14. So maybe 14 or 15, I was given an option. So I was pretty much, because school was sort of going downhill rapidly for me, and I was drifting like as I said, I was on the national team, but it was sort of, my focus wasn't really there. And it was pretty much, I sat down and my dad says to me, look, you have two options here. You can forget about school and fully focus on sports. You can forget about like sports and fully focus on school, but you're not going to be one of these wee arseholes that run about the streets with nothing going for them. And that's one thing that stuck with me. In saying that, now I still had to go to school and do the different wee courses because you couldn't just drop out of third year. But if I had to go to Dublin for training in the evening, I was taken out of school early that I was ready to go to Dublin for training in the evening. Do you know, like if I had to go to Dublin for training late at night, because that's where I live, about an hour, probably an hour and 20 minutes away from Dublin back then, because the motorway wasn't there. So I used to come home, and if I didn't have to go in, maybe first thing in the morning because I was in Dublin the night before to get my sleep, or I didn't have to go in, I could come out in the evening to go and do something. I could be away for competition. So I was sort of then pushed into, I wasn't pushed into fighting, but I was pushed into like the sports end of things, like so that it didn't just become one of the boys running the streets.
Now, with that being said, anyway, obviously you're at school quite reluctantly, sort of going through the motions because you have to, but now you're doing, much as we're going to say it's quite crude, as in doing fighting, because as much as it's martial arts, when you're that sort of age, you're like, okay, I'm kicking and punching things. How did you find being around people at school with that anyway? Because again, did you get into a lot of fights at school? Was it something not really on the radar? Was it just going through the motions, get your head down? What was that sort of like?
I only ever got in 2 fights in school.
Did you win?
That was like in school, like on school grounds, I've only ever got into 2 fights. One had nothing got to do with me, and my class was fighting with a different class, and I just sort of jumped in for the fun of it. And then the second one, I got into a fight at the weekend, sticking up for one of my mates, and then an older fella came in. I was in fourth, so I was 15. I was 15 at the time, and a boy came in that was, he was 2 years older than me, so I would have been a third year and he would have been a fifth year. And he came in he was suspended at the time. And he came into school for the sole purpose of meeting me in the lunch yard for a fight. I said, that's no problem. And I broke my finger at the weekend. It was cold and fucking like I landed a punch wrong. So that was my excuse on how I got out of trouble. But I'll never forget it, because I went into the dinner hall and I sat down to eat my dinner, and the connecting fella, the fella that was in my year that would have been friends with your other boy, I got my dinner and sat down and just said over, Mickey, are we fighting? And your other boy stood up and goes, yeah, and stood out the big man. I goes, right, I'll see you at the handball alleys. That's where there was no cameras or anything, so that's where you could get away with it. And I sat down at my dinner. Says to the boys, right, come on, we'll go here and get this sorted. And as we were walking out, because there was a group of older people than us, they were sort of, then they were sort of throwing their weight about and stuff, and giving my friend shit and doing this and doing that. And one of the boys had threatened my friend, and I goes, right, well, look, after we're finished, me and you can have a fight then. Me and you sort this out, leave him out of it. And I mean, I bit lumps out of this fella. See, whenever it started, I walked round and I sort of, I walked around the corner and says, right, are you ready? Yep. And he swung a dig and missed. And he swung an hour punch and missed again. I remember saying to myself, right, if anyone can see this, I'm not in trouble no more. He's just tried to hit me twice. And as I said, I slapped the head. There was blood coming from his ears and everything, so there was. And at that stage, then nothing happened. Teachers came in, split it up, and I got a slap on the wrist pretty much. I got in-house suspension or something, so I got to spend a day with the foreign teacher. Like doing jobs around, doing messages and stuff. And your boy, he got in serious trouble. He wasn't even meant to be in the school at the time, so they'd seen him swinging for me first, so I was only defending myself. So that's the only other fight that I got into in school. And your boy would have been a bit of a hard lad, So with that, then I never really had much other trouble then. But outside of school, I had a lot of it, but in school it was grand.
Fucking hell. I mean, I like the way you got the blind spot as well. I mean, you sort of clocked that out quite nicely. I like the sort of
Yeah.
the respect of understanding thing. Okay, I've got my lunch still. Let me finish this first. Like you get that. You don't. I'm not wasting this.
Food's the priority.
This microwave burger ain't going to waste. This is my lunch. Then we're gonna go sort of sat around the corner.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, with like competitions in itself, like when you were competing like early into like doing martial arts, was it the same kind of like fight animosity in the same kind of sense? Was it sport? Because that sounds like, okay, I've been fighting in my own training, and now it's just another fight. Like, what was that sort of transition like? Sort of, was it sport for you at early ages? Was it fighting? What was that to you?
Fighting. It's always been fighting for me, so it has it's between, like, as I said, when I was younger, uh, I didn't get many fights in school, but between playing Gaelic football and just the wee rivalries from the clubs, and then going out to the sort of teenage discos and stuff, I got in plenty of fights. But they were never really too bad because you had some sort of training. You could always kind of handle yourself. Like nowadays, nearly everyone's doing something. So, John, like you could be in a bit more bother, but back then, no one was really doing too much. You might have got the odd boxer or something, but nothing, like nothing worth talking about. Like,
Yeah, you start seeing cage wall defense and Weatherspoons. See the Saturn, yeah, you start seeing all that kind of stuff. So we got Dagestani
yeah,
handcuffs in the in the eights, but here we are. I mean, so we'll take a little interval there, mate. Any sponsors you want to shout out?
yeah. Just to start off, my main sponsor is the McAllister Group. It's actually a massive company, so it is, but it's local to Newry. So I have to give them a massive shout out. They've stuck with me all year with keeping me going, throughout the year, like in the rough times, like, and then as soon as we got out of it, they were straight back on board in September, for the Ventre thing again, like. And then we have Our Kings would be the next one. The raffle company there. It's local, it's huge too. Then there's B&M Meats, Kieran Morgan Mail Grooming, Buzzard Comics, Arcadian IT, Comiskey Nursery Services, and then now Tolgan Mechanics and Morn Hydraulics.
Or is that it?
Plenty.
It's
But
like NASCAR. Look at that. It's got all the sponsors.
I know, yeah. No, it's see to be honest with you, the support, like that's not even like that's the sponsors that look after me financially. If we were to get into the sponsors, like the boys that are like Damien Rooney that takes me for PTs every week, like just for like to see me do well. You've Gav Kidd that takes me for PTs to see me to do well. You've like Yannick McGee does my nutrition, and just like they're doing things for you to see you to succeed. Like doing the same as the boys at East 28, they're all there just wanting me to do well. The same as like and the recovery room, that all giving, like, letting me use their services, or taking me for training, or they said letting me into the ice bath and the sauna and like the hot tub and everything to recover. So yes, they're not like financially helping you, but they're looking after your body, and you won't be able to if you had to pay for them services, it would cost you a bomb. Like, so there is the support in this. It's only a small town, and everyone's behind me in it. Like,
I mean, that's so important, having that level of camaraderie again, because as much as it isn't the direct financial support as that and the other, it's still money you're not spending on it in the first place. And again, it's not even just that as a gesture, it's them showing that support by wanting to help you in that kind of way. And that's so important. And on the note of things supporting us, shout out to our podcast sponsors, the English Hypnotist. For anyone looking to take a step up in their mental game, whether it's business, fighting, whatever it may be, chat to Richard Hart, he's your man. The Rieco Clothing was the next one. Pod 10 for a checkout, 10% off on all products. The range is always expanding. Have a look. And People's IT for your website needs. Chat to Chow, he's your man. Hey, I look at sound like a radio DJ. Love to see it. It's good fun. So we'll go for a couple of Instagram questions, and I'll let you enjoy your evening. So, advice to amateur fighters going pro. What would you give to an AMI looking to turn pro eventually?
An amateur looking to turn pro, I would say enjoy, number one, the most common thing is enjoy the process. Like, work on your weakest area and always spend more time on your weakest area and always focus on your strengths. Don't forget about them. And also, there's too much pressure putting amateur fighters these days. Like, a lot of amateur fighters I know are being treated like professionals. You need to build that experience. There should be fights that you're doesn't matter of the outcome. Like, say for toxic, if you hurt your foot, fight injured, get the experience. You hurt your ribs, you hurt something, there's certain injuries you can't fight with, there's other injuries you can't fight with. Take that time as an amateur. That's going to disappear whenever you turn professional. But if you don't have the experience, if you think you're always going to fight at 100% like health, you'll probably never have a pro fight, because it just doesn't happen. And they only be put under that pressure whenever money's involved and stuff isn't great. You'd want to have all that experience built up, have your good days as amateurs, have your bad days as amateurs, but always show up and fight. It does stand by you whenever you turn pro.
Yeah, I like that a lot, because again, you get people in the gym, so you get a mix of levels. Like, for example, in my gym, we got Jordan Machenik, Tom Mearns, and again, a lot of other pros, but also a lot of amateurs. And again, it's almost feels, okay, if we're competing, if we're getting similar levels and sparring on this, that, and the other, then it's like, okay, now I guess that makes me pro. It means I have to compete at this level. When realistically, it's not just, catching someone on an off day, it's everything else. It's the experience. Like you're saying, they're fighting injured, fighting uncomfortable, all the other experience is so important. Next one we've got is, how many times a week should you do S&C, strength and conditioning, during a fight camp?
4. Maybe 4.
So what kind of S&C do you sort of do, in the sense of, is it quite high output? Is it more movement stuff? Is it alignment stuff? What's your S&C like?
Well, on Tuesday I would do sort of weights, and then I would do hard cardio, assault bikes, ski ergs, bike ergs, more sort of CrossFit kind of ball thrusters and things like that. So a lot of cardio and endurance based stuff. And then also I would do sort of more strength and power based stuff with demo before I would do that as well. Thursday would be a good mix of both strength and conditioning, going from one to the other to the other. And then Saturday would be a big output on the cardio, so it would. So there's sort of 2 strength and 2 conditioning, doing endurance based days, and then also on a Wednesday I would do a lot of mobility and stretching with Gareth.
Okay, so you're still getting the systems sort of working, and again, you're getting the building the frame and everything else. Okay, it's quite a cool one. With how often should you spar, and how hard do you spar?
How often do you spar? I'd spar twice a week. For the last fight, I'd spar twice a week. I'd do 5 rounds on a Wednesday, getting short tank pretty much, 5 fives, and then we do positional sparring after. And then on a Friday, build the same again for this fight. I would do 3 5-minute rounds. Friday was fight day, so I'd take the whole day off, chill out with the child. That was sort of my day. I would take the drunk guy booked off work to spend time with the child, and then Friday evening come in around the time you're meant to be fighting and do 3 hard rounds sparring, and then positional sparring after.
Now, with positional stuff, is it your standard mount, side control, half guards? Is it more like situational, like, okay, you've been taken down, get up, you got X amount of time left in the round? What's your positional like in specifics?
Yeah, so it could be holding someone against the wall, it could be being held against the wall, it could be sitting with your back against the wall to get up, you could be stuck with someone on your back, could be stuck on bottom and half guard, top and half guard. Like looking to do pretty much your basic, like every area, or mix it up with a bit of like shoot boxing, like boxing, wrestling kind of stuff. That's not really positional, but we would do that as well, just to sort of take the intensity out of like the intensity out of the sparring. Right, everyone go take your shin guards off, do whatever, go and do a wee bit of like boxing and wrestling, and we would drop the time to like maybe 3 minutes. But positional would just be wall, and as you said, positionals on the ground, like.
Yeah, because again, it's interesting having that transition from, okay, this is pretty much a fight, getting paid for, but with shin guards on, to, okay, now we're going to try and not flow, but, take this take it down a couple of notches and just sort of understand a bit more.
Yeah. And then the same over, if you're going to go off, that's personally what I do whenever I'm at home. And then Saturdays, we used to, before, whenever we were actually allowed to run classes and train together, Saturdays would have been our sparring day, where you would have come in for an hour and sparred, but it would have been like a lot less. Like you're sparring for an hour and we're doing 3-minute rounds, so it would have been a lot less intense, if that makes sense. Like, because you could do 3 or 4 rounds, sit out a round, or it could be the heavy boys and then the light boys, or if days like that, I would just jump in the cage and not sit any of the rounds out, but just sort of mess about in the cage and work on things and go at a lower pace, like. And then whenever I'm out in the States, whenever I'm out in alpha male, you do fives on a Wednesday, and then about an hour, maybe 12 to 15 rounds on a Saturday of boxing. Then that's the sparring. If it was out there, what would be done?
Yeah, because again, alpha male is very sort of wrestling heavy as well, and it's seeing a lot of people out there like Corey McKenna and a few other people who sort of make the camp over there, Scott Malone as well. Getting interesting sort of mix of people. And last one, favorite thing to do outside of fighting, like what's your sort of off-topic thing in itself? Do you ever sort of thing you switch off with?
Yeah, it used to, like, I've always loved motorbikes, so I have, but I'm a complete disaster and think John, I'm great at everything, like, but if, like, just the competitiveness, John, like, if you're out on a bike, you have to sort of try and keep up, so, or try and be ahead. So I'm sort of more into watching the bikes now, or I got myself a mountain bike and just the way I sort of doing the trails and stuff like that. Like, that's sort of my main thing at the minute, like from lockdown.
It's always good to have that time away from sort of, being a full-time fight, being a full-time dad, and just trying to like, okay, maybe let's just take a bit of time to be present in something else, just to like, unwind a little bit. 100%. Now, most important question of the podcast, my friend, social media, where can people find you?
Decky McAleenan MMA on Facebook and Instagram, and then McAleenan MMA on Twitter.
Links to those will all be in the description.